Hello, friends, and happy Monday, January 11th, 2020. Joining me on today's podcast, I've got three interesting perspectives from three regular good friends of the show. Professor Eric Segall, Georgia State University constitutional law professor, comedian and lawyer J.L. Cauvin, and D.C. insider and all-around brilliant political analyst Bill Boyle, Bill B in D.C. I am Pete Dominick. It's time to stand up with me. Hey guys, I hope you had a good weekend. I tried to. It was difficult to look away from the television screen. I couldn't get away at all. I worked Friday and I pretty much worked right through the weekend, and it's done Sunday night and I'm still working because I can't tear myself away from the computer and the TV screen because I feel like what we're watching happen and unfold in our country is something I want to see. It's something I want to witness. It's something I'm extremely curious and concerned about. I want to know what happened. I want to know why it happened. I want to know who was there and what they were doing and what they were thinking. I want every detail. I can't get enough of trying to understand what happened in the past week and trying to wrap my head around it. On Tuesday, you had the Georgia runoff re-elections where Democrats took back the Senate. But just as we were trying to understand what that means and how it happened and celebrate, all of a sudden an insurrection, a raid at the U.S. Capitol began. It was horrible. It was like you were being intimate with someone, like right there at the beginning when it's just awesome and you're passionately, you're making out and you're feeling each other up and you get that chill down your spine. And then the person that you're hooking up with like starts biting you a little bit. Like, what the fuck? That's what it was like. It was awesome. It was ecstasy. You're like, oh my God, I cannot believe the Democrats have taken back the Senate. What the fuck? Are you serious right now with biting me? Why are you biting me? I'm not into biting. Who told you I was into that? That's what it was like. Tell me I'm wrong. All right, I'll calm down. So on Wednesday, you had a strange brew of Trump-supporting militia types, QAnons, men and women, old and young, frail and athletic, although mostly not, costumed, cosplaying, cops and firefighters, and even state politicians, artists and musicians, you name it. Every type of person all there to try and overthrow a democratic election because they all apparently believed something had been stolen from them. They all had a grievance, and they all were pretty much overwhelmingly white. Sure, there were some people of color there, no doubt about it. I saw so many of the videos. I feel like at this point I've seen all the videos, and there was definitely some black guys there. I don't think I saw one black woman. Correct me if I'm wrong. Certainly not a lot of diversity, but it's a white nationalist movement. What do you expect? We couldn't believe in 2016 that we had elected a white nationalist, but we should have believed it. There's a huge amount of people in this country that have no idea or understanding about our history, and frankly, they really don't want to understand it. And then there's the rest of us, the majority. But after 4 years of Donald Trump, we thought more of you would have figured this out and understood what the Black Lives Matter movement has been screaming out for years. Well, forever, in one form or another in this country. And they still haven't figured it out, which is why when the white nationalists lost, they have become so animated, so angry, and so violent. Because this is it for them. They'd gotten there. He'd gotten there. There's no way we can allow him to leave. We have to keep him in the seat of power, no matter what it takes. And on Wednesday, we saw exactly what it would take. And frankly, it's a lot more organization and some leadership and some directions, because those stupid motherfuckers had no idea what they were doing. Did you watch these videos? It was every man for themselves. It was little kid in a candy shop. Are they technically terrorists? Yeah. But were most of them actually terrorizing? No. They were just confused, wondering what the hell was happening, whether or not Q's prophecy had come true, and where the men's room was. These stupid backwoods motherfuckers, brainwashed by their favorite commentator or commentators, had no idea where to go, and they were all yelling at each other. One guy in one video got a megaphone and told them all his fellow Trumpers to sit down and be quiet. And another guy looked at him and goes, shut the fuck up. They weren't on the same page. They didn't know what they were supposed to be doing there. I mean, watching them try to convince and reason with the Capitol police officers, in many cases, actually convincing them, in my opinion, from what I could tell, telling them to get out of there, and they didn't want to hurt them. But I mean, just the conversations and the desperation, and once they got into Nancy Pelosi's office, what did they do? They acted like children. They just messed it up. They picked up the phone. They made some calls. They stole some shit. What were they hoping for? What did they think was going to happen? When was their leader going to arrive and take back America? And the sad thing about it is that they're upset for all of the wrong reasons. This idea that they were actually somehow going to be doing better under this guy's rule, when in fact, obviously, we have done so far worse. And finally, the most important detail of the week, that over 3,000 Americans were dying every day. Hospitals are overloaded. Healthcare workers are at the end of their ropes and worse. COVID continues to tear its way across our nation without concern or regard about what is happening in the rest of the world. But on a personal note, I do have some good news. On Sunday, I threw the girls in the car, Ava, almost 16, Julia's 13, and we went and met my parents, who are 76 and almost 75, about 2 hours north, and we swapped cars because I bought my mom's used Honda CR-V off of her. More importantly, we hung out for a little over an hour, all masked up, and of course, I'm nervous about, God forbid, we could get them sick, but I feel pretty comfortable being outside with masks on. I think it's pretty hard to get in that case. And so I'm not really too worried. I'm actually really happy that my parents got to see their granddaughters, who are the most important thing in their lives, and they haven't seen them since the end of the summer. So that was an emotional and awesome thing to have happen. And I hugged both my parents, and, you know, I didn't want to let go. I feel so fortunate to have them and that they are actually in good health. I'm so lucky for that. At their age, and with COVID, and with knowing so many people who have lost somebody or who are older, and of course that their parents are gone. I cherish every moment with my mom and dad, who are a riot. So many of you have told me about your parents, your relationships with them, and if they're gone, how much you miss them. And I am so sorry to get so sad and depressing right here, but I say it only to tell you how wonderful it was to see both my mom and dad, and that they're doing well, and they say hello. Big stars here on the podcast and in my life. I'll have to get them back on this week to do the news with me. And speaking of the news, I feel like, in a way, we have some interesting positive developments happening over the weekend when social media companies deplatformed Donald Trump and others as well, when a whole bunch of right-wing lunatics started losing thousands and thousands of followers as Twitter was purging them for any number of different reasons. After the terrorist attack on our Capitol and Democrats taking back the Senate and the seat of power, some of these social media and technology companies saw the writing on the wall and realized they're going to have to move. We can debate what all of it means, but it's what's happening right now. And more importantly, potentially than that, maybe not quite as sexy, but still pretty hot, you've got major corporations and companies distancing themselves from the Trump family, the Trumps, and any Republicans who have been selling the big lie that the election was stolen. Yeah, here are the headlines. The PGA, the Professional Golf Association of America, pulled the 2022 PGA Championship from the Trump National at Bedminster Course in New Jersey on Sunday, days after supporters of the president attacked the U.S. Capitol. The PGA of America Board of Directors voted tonight to exercise the right to terminate the agreement to play the 2022 PGA Championship at Trump Bedminster. The PGA president said in a statement on Twitter, it's become clear that conducting the PGA Championship at the Trump Bedminster would be detrimental to the PGA of America brand, and it would put at risk the PGA's ability to deliver our many programs and sustain the longevity of our mission. It's a massive, massive announcement. It really cuts to their bottom line, obviously. That's a tremendous amount of money that they're going to be losing, and obviously to the president's ego as well. He can't be happy about that. And then Washington Post and others reporting Marriott and others pledged to cut off money to members of Congress who doubted Biden win. Anti-Trump group Lincoln Project also plans to target companies that support politicians voting against the election results. Marriott, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Commerce Bank, and so many more corporations that by the time you're hearing this, I'm sure there are so many more, have announced they will not be giving the money to those lawmakers who voted to undermine our democracy. I mean, these are massive, massive developments, and they're positive developments in my mind. Money in politics is what it's all about, and they are taking theirs out. My big question for you, what does this change? The Trump-supporting friends, family members, associates that you know, has the attack last week on the nation's capital changed anything for them? I asked that question on Twitter, and I'd love to know what you think. So let me know. standupwithpete@gmail.com, always for any of your thoughts or ideas or guests to join me on the show. All right, now there's so many more things I want to talk about and mention, but I've got three great guests. We cover a lot of ground with them, and I want to get to a few audio clips and a quick news dump if we still have time. If I have time, it's getting late here. But here we go. Let's start with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She was on ABC News this week with George Stephanopoulos, and here it is, the clip I wanted to share with you at least.
Several Republican members of Congress who opposed raising objections to the certifying the Electoral College vote have written a letter to President-elect Biden opposing impeachment. Here's what the letter says. It says, in the spirit of healing and fidelity to our Constitution, we ask you formally request that Speaker Nancy Pelosi discontinue her efforts to impeach President Donald J. Trump a second time. A second impeachment only days before President Trump will leave office is as unnecessary as it is inflammatory. They're saying for the sake of unity, forego impeachment.
Well, I think there's a couple of things. One is we have to understand that what happened on Wednesday was insurrection against the United States. That is what Donald J. Trump engaged in, and that is what those who stormed the Capitol engaged in. And so when we talk about healing, the process of healing is separate and, in fact, requires accountability. And so if we allow insurrection against the United States with impunity, with no accountability, we are inviting it to happen again. That is how serious it is. And I do not believe that perhaps my colleagues weren't in that room. Perhaps my colleagues were not fully present for the events on Wednesday, but we came close to half of the House nearly dying on Wednesday. And if another head of state came in and ordered an attack on the United States Congress, would we say that should not be prosecuted? Would we say that there should be absolutely no response to that? No. It is an act of insurrection. It's an act of hostility. And we must have accountability because without it, it will happen again.
Wow. I'm in full agreement with Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and I just can't see it any other way. Good luck convincing me and others. And now let's stay with ABC News and head over to their panel where they welcomed regular contributor who they probably pay like $150,000 at least a year. Chris Christie. It's probably a lot more than that, actually. It's ABC News. Ugh, sickening. Anyway, George Stephanopoulos says, should Donald Trump be impeached? And listen to Chris Christie wrestle with that like a New Year's resolution.
Yeah, listen, I think they're all going to have to vote their conscience and look at what happened. I mean, what we had was an incitement to riot at the United States Capitol. We had people killed. And to me, there's not a whole lot of question here. So,
So you think it was an impeachable offense?
Before Jordan. Oh, sure. Yeah. And
you'd vote to impeach.
I think that, if I think it's an impeachable offense, that's exactly what I would do, George. But I'm not in there. But you want my opinion? That's my opinion. I think if inciting to insurrection isn't, then I don't really know what is. But I will say too that the Democrats, by what they did earlier on Ukraine, have kind of cheapened this a little bit too. And I think that, these are the type of actions which, this mechanism was put into place for. I think a lot of Republicans at this point, I'm sure that Congressman Kinzinger is right, that there's some fear someplace, but I haven't heard it this week. What I've heard from fellow Republicans is that they've had enough.
Yeah, well, who are you talking to, Chris Christie? And that bullshit about Democrats cheapening impeachment. for when they finally did impeach Trump. He should have been impeached long before that, but Democrats couldn't get the public support for it. And then they did. They got it in spades when President Trump called up the leader of a foreign country whose enemies with our enemy, Russia, and tried to blackmail him into conducting a phony investigation into Joe Biden and his son. Yeah, that's impeachable. Chris Christie just really polluting the conversation and lowering the bar, as he tends to do in his clever demeanor. Now, let me play for you one of my favorites, Jake Tapper. I think Jake Tapper has been doing a great job during the Trump administration and before it, frankly. And I want to just play for you the first almost 2 minutes of his Sunday show on CNN, State of the Union.
Is just utterly devastated after one of the darkest days in our nation's history, a coup attempt, no longer bloodless, instigated by the President of the United States. The flags at the U.S. Capitol are at half-staff this morning for the police officer Brian Sicknick, who was murdered this week. But they are not at half-staff at the White House, perhaps because Officer Sicknick was the enemy of the terrorist mob, and the mob loves Trump. The mob, by trying to intimidate, threaten, or even kill the vice president and members of Congress who were counting the electoral votes, that mob was in turn loved back by Trump. According to Republican Senator Ben Sasse, White House aides told him that the president was, quote, delighted watching the insurrection. In Trump's view, they were fighting for him. Trump put out a statement. "We love you," he said, after the attack. "You're very special." Now, it might be difficult to hear these words. It's difficult to say them because it's so ugly, but it's true. The flag isn't down at the White House because the president is not mourning Officer Sicknick. He hasn't personally decried the terrorists in any way because the president loves the terrorists. And he reportedly has not even spoken to his own vice president, whose life was at risk since Wednesday. The images of this attack are so shocking that many of Trump's enablers are finally, with just a few days left in his presidency, beginning to get the goddamn point that his continuous lies and humoring of racists and winks and nods to violent extremists are dangerous. Twitter and many other social media outlets have silenced him permanently. Members of his cabinet are bailing like rats from a sinking rat. Some of his closest allies on Capitol Hill are now trying to weasel their way out of their responsibility for the bloodshed, how they shared lies for months. And the case for Trump's second impeachment is expected to be introduced to the House tomorrow.
Ooh, fire from Jake Tapper, who has really done great work, I think, at CNN, along with several other people I know there. And I guess it gets you pretty fired up when you're constantly getting death threats if you work at CNN or any of the other major corporate media outlets or recognizable names. And in Jake Tapper's case, I'm sure plenty of them were anti-Semitic. You can only imagine how much worse it is for women and women of color on these cable networks. When you think about the damage, the wreckage, and the number of lives lost during hate crimes from this president, and watching his Department of Justice Civil Rights Division either look the other way or purposely not classify white supremacists as domestic terrorists, Jake Tapper wasn't having any of that, because that's exactly what they are. They might not be the most effective. They might not always get the job done. But when they do, lives are lost, as they were in a synagogue in Pittsburgh, at a Walmart in Texas, and so many other places as a result of what? Hatred, white supremacy. Yeah, it's a major problem if you haven't figured it out yet. And now here's a woman who I despise, and she is on Fox News, and you probably know who she is. You probably heard of her if you pay attention to political media, and she's terrible. She's dangerous. She's dumb, but smart enough to have a good career as a judge and then in cable television. But I would never threaten her. I would never call her a name because she's a woman either. Immutable characteristics. She's an asshole. But I'm not going to call her all of the other names and make gender-based comments because it's cheap and it's wrong, in my opinion. So I want to use this as an example. I'm sitting here talking about Jake Tapper and other people. You can hate people, as I do. I really don't like Jeanine Pirro, but I'm not going to threaten her and I'm not going to call her those types of names. But I am going to play her right now on the show because what she had to say on Fox News last night was decent.
Want to be clear. The actions at the United States Capitol 3 days ago were deplorable, reprehensible, outright criminal. These frightening and repulsive actions represent the most significant breach on our Capitol in over 200 years. And I don't care what happened in the past or whether those who did it think the election was stolen. That is not justification. 75 million of us are still angry about the election, but we don't storm the Capitol. And stop looking for other people to blame, including those dirtbag terrorists, Antifa. To those of you who did this, you did it of your own will, and you will be held accountable. Take the veil of politics off. Be totally objective. Anyone watching this must condemn it. And in the end, what was the point? What did you get out of it? Was there even a plan when you got in there, besides looking like a bunch of freaks, breaking windows, carrying off a podium, sitting at Nancy Pelosi's desk, leaving a love note with fingerprints behind, identifying yourselves with selfies, stealing, damaging property, trespassing, looting? 5 people are dead in your wake. A police officer, an Air Force veteran, not to mention countless injured, including a young police officer on video screaming as he's being crushed, blood coming out of his mouth. Did anyone stop to think that with this foolhardy effort to disrupt the congressional hearing, you have smeared 75 million of us because of what you did? Did anyone change their vote? No. You have tarnished all the good that's been done over the last 4 years because of this senseless lunacy. And worst of all, you have yielded the moral high ground to those who have repeatedly and consistently taken away our freedoms, our freedom of speech, religion, our right to be with our families, celebrate holidays, even go to work as you...
All right, Pirobot is starting to malfunction there, but she is making the point that you've yielded the high ground to progressives. By acting this way, by committing this horrible, horrible crime in front of the world, you have yielded the high ground and you've made us look like fools. And she is not wrong. Jeanine Pirro, how about that? Never thought I would say that. And finally, one more thing I want to play for you. It's the Terminator, former Republican governor of California, Arnold Schwarzenegger. He made a video reacting to the violent mob of Trump supporters storming the Capitol this past week with a video on Sunday that drew a very clear parallel to Kristallnacht. Am I saying it right? The night of broken glass. Here is the Terminator.
As an immigrant to this country, I would like to say a few words to my fellow Americans and to our friends around the world about the events of recent days. Now, I grew up in Austria. I'm very aware of Kristallnacht, or the night of broken glass. It was a night of rampage against the Jews carried out in 1938 by the Nazi equivalent of the Proud Boys. Wednesday was the day of broken glass right here in the United States. The broken glass was in the windows of the United States Capitol. But the mob did not just shatter the windows of the Capitol. They shattered the ideals we took for granted. They did not just break down the doors of the building that housed the American democracy. They trampled the very principles on which our country was founded.
That is why you've got to get to the chopper. Okay, sorry. The whole video is worth watching. He goes into his childhood in Austria and his alcoholic father who was abusive, as well as so many others, and why, and the post-World War II. It's really fascinating, actually, and you can watch the video. It's everywhere. All right, now it's time to get to the news dump, but I'm not going to play Donald Trump's voice anymore. Every day at this time, I go through some news headlines that aren't really political or COVID-related, although I think I'm going to hit some COVID ones today. But I always play Trump saying massive dumps about the massive voting dumps. But I got a thoughtful email from a listener and subscriber named Michelle, who said, I really like the news dump in the daily podcast, but please remove the Trump clip. I'm so looking forward to never having to hear that voice again, so it's always so jarring to hear it on your otherwise excellent podcast. Please, please, Michelle, Canadian Patreon supporter. Thank you, Michelle, and you're not alone. Others have said that as well. I thought it was funny, but I realized that his voice has always been triggering. But now that his voice has been silenced in so many ways on so many platforms, I'm not going to have any of him on mine, at least not in a comedy bit like that. All right, but does mean it leaves me without something a button to press. If I can't play Trump saying massive dumps, what should I do? So give me some ideas, or make up your own and send me some audio ideas, as many of you have in the past. So now it's time for the news dump. Let's start in Indonesia, where there was a tragic plane crash. A Boeing plane crashed with 69 people on board. Shortly after takeoff, the plane lost more than 10,000 feet of altitude in less than a minute. Everybody's worst nightmare. A passenger airplane crashed into the Java Sea in Indonesia on Saturday. Search and rescue teams have said they have found some debris. New winter storm began to develop in the southern high plains Sunday morning, bringing snow to Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi over the next 36 hours. Beginnings of the storm brought some snow to parts of New Mexico and Colorado on Saturday. Always thinking about listeners all over the country. Stay safe, stay healthy, enjoy the snow if you can. 4 people are dead, including the suspect, after an hours-long shooting spree across the Chicago area Saturday into Sunday. Man entered a parking lot in Chicago, shot a 30-year-old man who was sitting inside a car. Student at University of Chicago was pronounced dead. This is fucking horrific. I don't even want to read this story anymore. Oh, it's horrible violence. Hurry, get me something good. Do we have anything about an animal, a happy story? Hashmeat, do we have anything? What's this? Okay. Oh, here's one that involves animals and humans. Air pollution laws may have saved over 1.5 billion birds in American skies, according to a Cornell study. Countless human lives have been saved in the last 40 years since pollution regulations were signed into U.S. law, but tackling dirty air has also been saving the birds. A new large-scale study conducted by scientists at Cornell and the University of Oregon found that improved air quality under a federal program to reduce ozone population may have averted the loss of 1.5 billion birds during the past 4 decades. Yeah, that's the story I needed. Oh, and now for a sad animal story, maybe. The world's oldest orangutan has died at the age of 61. Speaking of Oregon, Inji was euthanized at the Oregon Zoo on Saturday following a battle against ill health, having thought to have been the oldest orangutan in the world at age 61. Aw, Inji, rest in power, brother. And finally, the COVID headlines are absolutely horrific. 373,699 U.S. deaths as of late Sunday night. California continues to be horrific. 395 deaths in one day. 1 in 5 in England have COVID, according to one study. 90,279,000 global cases. 22.5 million in the U.S. And then the next country is India at 10.5 million. Then Brazil, Russia, United Kingdom, France, Turkey, Italy, Spain, Germany, Colombia, Argentina. And I'm not going to keep reading every country. All right, that is your news dump for today. Sorry to end on a COVID note, but I want to get to my guests. I got 3 very smart guys, good friends of mine, who I spoke to all Sunday night. And let's start with Washington, D.C.'s own Bill Boyle. I had a really thoughtful conversation with him last night, and he has a lot of insight about Washington, D.C. and what happened, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed all of these conversations. I hope you listen to all 3 of them. Bill is a business owner. He runs parking garages in Washington, D.C., even though everybody thinks he's in the CIA. He's not. And we talk all the time. He's got a tremendous amount of credibility, and people really love when I reach out to him. So here is my conversation. He's on Twitter, by the way, at Bill B. in D.C. He'd love to hear from you. Here it is. Bill, thank you for joining me in conversation as always. You live in D.C. You've lived in Washington, D.C. for how long?
Over 30 years.
Why did you choose to live there and raise your son there with your wife?
I went to school here, and then I always thought I'd go back to Manhattan, but then I started a business, and that locked me in. And I started to love this city, to be honest with you.
What do you love so much about it?
Washington is both big enough to be a real city, but it's small enough that it's kind of like a small town. And if you're here for a while, you get to know so many people, and you get to know people from different strata like you would not normally get in a big city, especially a place like New York. So, I knew Jay Rockefeller quite well. I also know my garbage man really well. It's a good combo that way.
And how would you rank the insurrection, the events of this past week in D.C. in terms of your entire experience there as a resident?
It is the most consequential thing that has happened to me in 30 years in Washington, or I should say it's happened to the country in 30 years in Washington. It's bigger than Watergate. It is the first real attempt to contest the transfer of power in American history, period. It's an incredibly serious thing. And the only thing that's obscuring that to people is how slapstick, stupid, and obnoxious the people who tried to accomplish it were. Right. It loses some of its force because they're such obvious clowns. But they really went for it. They really did try to overthrow our form of government. And that's a pretty big deal.
Who do you think was in that mob and those thousands and thousands of people that showed up to Washington, D.C.? Because it'd been promoted by the president and everybody on the right all the way into the deep, dark web and QAnon. January 6th was a day that was well publicized, which is why I'm so outraged by anybody who says we could have never imagined this. I mean, it was like, that'd be like saying after U2 played Madison Square Garden, we could have imagined that U2 was going to have a concert at the Garden night. They planned it. Everybody knew they were going to be there. So that aside, who were those people? Because they flew from all over the country, apparently.
Right. And by the way, this is sort of the classic. They're the sort of blue collar people who've made a couple of bucks. This is not people under 50 grand a year. These are, plumbers, pool salesmen, people like that.
Well, I don't think there's any way to generalize. I think there was all kinds of people there. I think there were people that were lower income.
It's important, though, to point that out, because fascist movements very rarely come from the upper class. They very rarely come from the lower class. They tend to come from the less educated who have money, what the Germans used to call the shopkeeper class. And that's who was here for the most part on Wednesday. And their affiliations went from mainstream Republican supporters to QAnon people to 3%ers to Oath Keepers to almost every variety of extremist that's pro-Trump in the country. It was like the extremist palooza.
Right.
But you had again, 90% of them were complete clowns. The other 10% were highly organized people intending upon violence, assassination, or hostage taking. And I think that part of it has been really, at first people didn't really see it that way. As the days have gone on, maybe especially just down here, people are beginning to realize, like, holy shit, there was again, this is not the A-team, right? But they really did plan to take hostages or to kill people. I mean, there was a gallows on the grounds of the Capitol building.
Yeah.
And they were yelling, let's kill Mike Pence. I mean, this is a really serious thing. And honestly, the District of Columbia Metro PD saved the day. Without them, this would have been a much nastier situation.
You took your son down there and you dropped off flowers. You told me that privately. I'm making that public now because I want to ask you why you did that and why and how Washington, D.C. is reacting and responding to what happened in your town. I of course, lived in New York during 9/11, and it was an interesting time, of course. I'm not comparing the two. I think they're massively different. But nonetheless, there is a reaction in a community after a thing happens, period. And so why did you go there and drop those flowers off for the Capitol Hill police officer, right?
Yeah, so my kid had a class on Saturday morning, and I was going to bring him down there just to see it. And then I was waiting for him. I noticed there was a florist shop next door that was open. And I thought, okay, you know what? Why not bring flowers down? So it was that part of it was spur of the moment thing. But I just wanted him to see it. And then once the idea of the flowers came up, the bouquet, and I got to tell you, I said to the guy, I want a bouquet of like $50. And he said, what do you use it? What's it for? And I told him, and I think he gave me like $150 worth of flowers. Really, there's in this town, there is rage and anger and disgust at what happened. And, the florist was quite clear to me how utterly upset he was by everything. We've been invaded just as a city, forget about as, the nation's capital. We've been invaded, and that's the feeling. And so I felt like, this guy gets killed, and I look at my Facebook feed, and my Twitter feed, and all the people putting up Blue Lives Matter flags all summer, nothing at all. All the people who were telling me I have a lot of friends that are, police officers, or not even so much the police officers, they've been fine, but all the people the holster sniffers, as they say, the people who constantly tell you how great the police are, none of them had anything to say about Officer Sicknick being killed. None. Zero. Quite literally zero. And that part of it really intensely disgusted me. These folks aren't honoring this guy. This guy died to defend our republic. He, by the way, was a Trump supporter.
Is that right?
And he was known. Yes, he's known to be a very, very nice guy. He was not some, nose breather. He was nice to people. He was nice to one of the people who works on the Hill posted a story somewhere about how on election day or the day after election day in 2016, she and he up to that point had been giving each other friendly hard time about the election. And the day after Hillary Clinton lost, she came into work at the Hill and he saw her and she burst into tears and he came over and hugged her. Right? This is a nice guy, whatever his political affiliations, a nice guy who did his job and gave his life to do his job. And that is a thing that needed to be honored, I thought. And, I went down there and I talked to some Capitol Police and some MPD. There were Delaware National Guard there, and they were all so extraordinarily gracious. And, and the Capitol Police guy, by the way, the guys that I talked to, they just looked like they just were mortified, quite obviously. But I just wanted my son, I had the opportunity to show my son these things because of where we live and how close we live to everything. And I think it's good that he sees it. I wish every kid could.
Well, that's great, thoughtful, and great parenting, great role modeling, and a kind and generous gesture. I expect nothing less of you. But I still want to get kind of your analysis, your interpretation. It doesn't make it's right. I think everybody has their own interpretation. But since you're down there in D.C., and obviously we love you because you know a lot of people, and you have a thoughtful, interesting, intellectual, and historical perspective, what is your analysis of kind of, in terms of what you know, what happened? How did that happen? And I think it's too easy to blame one person or even one, agency, and the Capitol Police are getting rightfully criticized, but, for different reasons. But we're all, I feel, interpreting these videos the way that we want to. Oh, they let them right in and they were taking selfies with them. And there's a lot to say about all that there is, but I want to get your interpretation. What happened? How did that happen? I just assumed that the Capitol on a quiet day was guarded in a better way than that, and that they would have been a lot more prepared. And so what happened?
Sure. So, that day was mortifying for me because I think I was saying to you and other people, Trump's going to go for it. Trump is definitely going to go for it. By which I meant he was going to try to do what he did.
Yeah, you told me the morning of. You said we talked the morning of. You said, watch, he's going to walk them over to the Capitol and they're going to try to get in. It's going to get ugly. Right. You said that. That's exactly what he did.
And that's what he did. What was mortifying to me and to a lot of people down here is I never in a million years imagined that the Capitol Police would not be fully prepared for that eventuality. And so some things have come out. For instance, there were only 500 officers there at the beginning of the event. They were telling quite a different story to people in Congress who were asking them what their planning was. They said they were going to be, this is the leadership of the Capitol Police, said they would be fully staffed. They said they would be ready. They said they were listening to the intelligence, and they quite clearly weren't ready. They weren't staffed up, and they were quite clearly ignoring the intelligence. And Pete,
you didn't need intelligence, by the way. That's the thing that's bothering me. You could you could live in the middle of Arkansas and listen to a podcast and know what was being planned.
You could follow President Trump's now defunct Twitter feed, and you would know.
Just to be clear, I think it's weak to be like, "Wow, I can't stand them saying, well, we never could have expected this to happen." Like, really? Yeah. I mean,
and so what I don't know, and I think that this is worth looking at, is what occurred a product of complicity, of a complete inability to imagine that you might be a target because you're a bunch of white guys who think Trump's okay. Was it just total, absolute collapse of these people in their jobs? I mean, I know for a fact that during the the overrunning of the building, the command structure stopped talking to the regular Capitol policemen. They weren't talking to them. We're not on the radio. And so the Capitol Police were completely, separated into different units. And the only what improved it was when the DC police showed up, they kind of took control for a while, and they got the retaking of the building going. If the DC police had not been there, a whole different scenario. There would have been potentially one of two things would have happened. Either the Capitol Police who were doing the VIP protection would have had to have shot a ton of people, or there would have been a hostage situation. And it is utterly outrageous. And the word outrageous, by the way, talking to friends on the Hill, that's the word you hear from everybody. It is utterly incredibly outrageous that this happened. It never should have happened. They literally turned down help ahead of time. No, that's them. There's another whole layer to this, which is Miller at the Defense Department basically refused to countenance sending the National Guard in to help them for an hour and a half after this totally went out of control. Who's this?
The acting defense secretary?
Acting defense secretary. They refused. And what eventually happened is that the Secretary of the Army, Pence, McConnell, and Pelosi spoke, and the Secretary of the Army on his own authority went and got the National Guard moving. Maryland was calling, saying, let us go. Virginia was calling, saying, let us go. A lawyer who used to work for the Justice Department called on his own. He heard from one of McConnell's staff. He called the FBI and managed to convince them to move their SWAT teams over there, and said, don't wait. Don't try to build up in one place. Don't, just go. As each SWAT team gets there, go straight into the building. But think about that. You had the president enthusiastically chortling at this as it's happening on live TV. He's calling senators in the building under siege while it's happening. Jim Acosta reported, and I want to quote this very particularly, sources close to the president say that protesters want to stay in the building all night. Andrew Feinberg reported that the White House, there was definitely White House riot contact. In other words, and he said, bottom line, there was. In other words, people in the White House were talking to people in the building who were rioters.
Oh, wow.
There's the Capitol Police part of this. I think you could argue it was just utter ineptitude, but I think it's ineptitude to the degree that there was a slackness and a lassitude to the security that doesn't make any sense at all, and that you never normally see. You have the Pentagon refusing to provide support. You have, the district was trying to move their guard over. They were told no. This is effectively a slapstick coup by dumb people. They knew if they called the Pentagon and said, send the 82nd Airborne there to grab all the electoral ballots, the Army would say no, right? But this was sort of, I'm going to send my crowd of lunatics over there. Probably no one imagined they'd ever be able to break into the building. But I think that the White House imagined it would pressure senators. And then they hit what Trump thought was hitting the jackbox was everything breaking down, which in reality, the way this turned out is probably the worst possible outcome for Donald Trump you could imagine.
Yeah, let's talk about that now, because that's the next. I have a lot of questions about everything you just said in terms of your the way that you think the scenario happened. But I want to move on to. I do want to get your take on what this means. You were texting me earlier. You're the first person as often to reach out and tell me something that's happening about the PGA is canceling all tournaments and instituting a lifetime ban of ever holding events at Trump's courses, including stripping the 2022 PGA Championship. Then Citibank, JP Morgan, and Marriott, etc., are cutting ties and campaign money to anyone who voted to question Biden's electoral victory. Then you text me, Trump's website credit card processor just dropped him. Bill, what's happening?
What's happening is that corporate America saw the president try to launch a coup. And the reality is that corporate America, for all its many faults, they think democratic capitalism makes the most money. And so when a lot of these guys are, that is their main interest. But also a lot of these guys are like, look, I grew up in a fucking democracy. I'm not going to accept this turning into Venezuela or turning into Brazil. right? They're not all soulless suits, right? And you watch, AT&T will do the same thing tomorrow. You're going to see a lot of big corporations just cut these guys out. And it's because they know that Trump's way of doing things, if Trump managed to stay in the White House, or even if you got another sort of Trumpist in the White House, it hurts their bottom line. It hurts the country. It ruins the place they love. And so, we're not in a situation where Germany was, where IG Farben and Mercedes-Benz and Audi and all these companies supported the Nazis because the Nazis were offering them stability, right? Trump is not offering them stability. He's offering them the opposite. He's offering them unrest. He's offering them difficulty and problems. And so it's a key thing you need if you want to launch a successful coup, is sort of the support of at least large chunks of your corporate structure. And he's not going to get that here because he doesn't provide them with what they want. He's too dumb to think that through anyway.
I mean, so you're thinking that this continues, and what does it mean for the Trump family, and what does it mean for Republicans in Congress right now? I mean, are we seeing as, I don't know, I hadn't have time to look into it, but are these companies taking campaign donations away from Senators Cruz and Hawley and others?
That it depends on who you're talking about. Some have said something, some have said others, but yes, that's going to be part of it for at least some of those companies. And the reason I said, by the way, at the beginning, that it's the worst possible outcome for Trump. Yeah. Not to get all, you never watched The Wire, by the way. That's a terrible.
Yeah, I still haven't. I'm embarrassed. I know.
There's a thing in The Wire where this guy Omar Little says, "If you come at the king, you best not miss." Trump came at the king. He tried to assassinate our form of government, and he missed comically and badly. It would be comical, I should say, if 5 people weren't dead or 6 people weren't dead. Now, he missed, and now he has provided all the ammunition that anyone who's ever hated him will ever need to destroy him. I mean, who's going to lend him money now? Nobody. Maybe some Russians, maybe some Saudis. That's it. Who's going to want to be invested in his golf courses if they can't get the PGA? Nobody. Who's going to want to stay in his hotels? Nobody. This is, Trump has immolated himself. He is now tainted, and the stink of him covers his whole family. I think he has very effectively destroyed himself. I do think there will continue to be violence. I think we're going to have domestic terrorism from Trump supporters for years to come. But that's not how you become a caudillo, a tyrant in a country like this. And so we didn't get 50 people shot by the Capitol Police who could be martyrs, right? Instead, we got 2 police officers who are now dead, who are the martyrs of this situation. And politically, it's absolute poison for the GOP. Is going to have a civil war, a political civil war within their own ranks, because this is so clearly, utterly toxic for them. A good example is Parler. Did you know Parler just got booted offline tonight? Yeah, it's pretty big development. Right. Parler, there are suspicions, which I think are probably correct, that there is Russian money behind Parler. They have a LLC in Delaware that owns the company, and the Mercers and Bongino and a couple other people are part of the company, but it's super murky, and there's a lot of, I don't think I'm talking out of school when I say there's a lot of discussion that they probably have Russian backing. What happened today is that basically Parler, like, just every step of the way, Apple said, no, we're not going to deal with you anymore. Then Google said that. And then Amazon went, oh, okay, good. Well, they're on our servers, out. And that never happens that fast. These guys all sign contracts for things like this. But you know what they did? They just said, there's probably a morals clause in there. Boom, boot them. The Parler CEO admitted that his comment yesterday about, quote, many competing for our business was wrong. He now says, that's right, no one wants to host our website, Parler, after being dropped by Amazon. Additionally, he says Parler's attorneys have dropped them as a client. What is happening? What does this mean? If they can't post on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or Parler, what does it mean? Or TikTok. Well, anywhere. What does it mean? Because a lot of people will argue that it only makes things worse. They go underground. They're harder to track. They get worse. They're martyrs. They get angrier. What do you think? Yeah, but that's fucking stupid, to be blunt. The people who say that, that's just fucking stupid. The bottom line is this. Propaganda comes from the word propagate, right? if you can't propagate your propaganda, if you can't put it out there and have one person know about it tomorrow and 5 people the next day, then it doesn't do any good. It doesn't work. You don't inflame people more by cutting down their ability to proselytize across the country about being Nazis. They're already inflamed. They're already nuts. What you can do is cut down their ability to light other things on fire, other people on fire. And what's happened here is that, you know, this is, by the way, like, if you're wondering if it was a coup or not, that's kind of how you know that these big corporate entities are going, we want nothing to do with this. They're trying to overturn the system. A week ago, a month ago, they never would have done it. They never would have done it. But now things have become so dangerous and so, you know, potentially volatile that they're like, it's a chip shot. There's not even there's no thinking about it. You have created a situation where people were trying to hang representatives on the lawn of the Congress and broke into the Congress to do it. You're not, what are you inflaming beyond that? Right? You don't, and by the way, you don't beat extremism by refusing to confront it. You don't. You have to confront it. You have to face it. You have to call it what it is. And people aren't going to like that, by the way. A lot of people I grew up with who read my Facebook page hate me now. Fuck them. I don't care. The bottom line is, if you're going to be an extremist, you're going to support that stuff, if you're going to even just be complicit in it, you need to be confronted with it. You need it to shoved in your nose. A police officer, for instance, got killed on Capitol Hill on Wednesday, and you don't seem to have a problem with that. That you need to pay for that. You need to pay a social price for that and an economic price for that. And if you're willing to shoot at somebody, well, maybe you need to pay the ultimate price for that. Because that's how you stop extremism. You don't stop it by being, you know, upset that people aren't being nice to each other. That's not how this works.
What do you think the best strategy for Democrats in Congress should be in the next 10 days?
They definitely need to push impeachment through. They need to they're doing kind of a 2-track thing. People get too caught up in the sort of details of it. They shouldn't. Democrats just need to get impeachment going. I think the idea, honestly, of putting the impeachment bill in and then holding it for 100 days so that Biden can get his first agenda through.
Right.
I think that actually makes sense. You're not going to be able to get impeachment done in 5 days anyway, right? So you might as well, it's actually better to let a Biden come off to a good start, number one. Number two, there's going to be a lot more evidence in a month, in 3 months, than there is right now about what happened in the last week. You know, once Trump is out, the NSA is going to be saying, okay, here are all the communications. The FBI is going to be saying, okay, here's what we know. And they're not going to be constrained by Trump appointees trying to stop them.
That brings up another really interesting question that a lot of people, I'm sure, are trying to answer right now. And I'm sure we have a lot of assumptions. But what is your best answer to what changes after January 20th when all of the national security agencies, all of the legal agencies, everything is run by Democrats? Do we start learning a whole bunch of shit we didn't know happened in the weeks and months and years to come?
Yes, I think that we know about 5% of all the things that happen. And one of the things that's almost certainly happening right now is that a lot of evidence is being destroyed. And we will find that out. We will find out much more. You know, once Trump's not in the White House, his ability to muscle people evaporates, right? So people who weren't willing to talk today are going to be willing to talk in a month. And
that's
believe me,
the
knives are going to be out for him from the closest people to him. You're going to see people that you would not believe sitting down with 60 Minutes and saying, here is all the crazy things I saw.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right.
I think you're going to be surprised. I think this attempt on Wednesday is a sea change, because before there were benefits to being loyal to him. Now what are the benefits to being loyal to him if you're not like the kind of person who wants to be constrained to some weird little cult, right? There's people who want to be taken more seriously in that administration still. And there's people in that administration still who want to have a real regular Washington career. Those people will talk.
All right. Well,
yeah,
we will see what happens. I mean, it may also is a big development that on Tuesday, Democrats won the Senate, because the calculus would change if if Mitch McConnell was still in charge of the Senate, he could have leverage to say, well, we're not going to confirm any of your cabinet secretary as long as you're going to be continue to go after the president. We're not going to. He probably would have said that too.
A snapping turtle with dentures. That sounds like.
I mean, so that changes a lot.
It changes everything. Here's the number one thing, easiest, simplest thing it changes. Biden doesn't need to fight for his appointees anymore. Neera Tanden becomes the head of OMB with no fight.
Right.
And there would have been an enormous one. So just take 90 days at the beginning of the Biden administration where he just gets stuff done immediately rather than having to spend 90 days staffing up. That's number one. Number two, it changes all the committees. Every committee now is going to be going at a Democratic agenda, which means, like, for instance, the Intelligence Committee, which has tons and tons and tons of information about what happened all the way through the Trump administration, and which was clearly, if Burr had not been running it, would have been putting things out that were, and they even did put out things that were terrible for Trump.
Yeah.
We're going to find out so much just on the legislative side and the Senate side because we have control now. It really is. And by the way, another thing about that is, I think, undersold just because there's so much going on. Mitch McConnell on Wednesday morning, before any of this happened, wanted to murder Trump for losing his majority. That's what Mitch McConnell cared about. It's all he cared about. He can control the Senate. And when he controls the Senate, he controls the appointments. He has tons of power. Well, Trump destroyed that. Trump is why they lost those races in Georgia, very definitely. So McConnell was already furious with him. Add on to that if there had been a little, beer hall pooch on Wednesday, a revolution destroys Mitch McConnell's power just as it would have destroyed Joe Biden's. Right? Mitch McConnell doesn't retain any power if Trump's people manage to seize the White House. And so Mitch McConnell is going to have a ton, absolute fuck ton of motivation to destroy Trump now. And don't underestimate that. And that ties into what happened in the Senate in Georgia.
I hope you're right about that as well.
He's not going to advertise it, but Mitch McConnell's the kind of guy who knows how to slip a knife in slowly. So.
Have a knife. I'm going to slip it in very slowly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Elaine, can you give me a knife? At Bill B in DC. Always a pleasure when you join me.
Cheers. Thank you, brother. And by the way, if you're thinking of coming to Washington between the 17th and 20th of this month, stay home. There's probably going to be violence, and it's better off if you're not here.
Thank you very much for that PSA as well.
Yeah. Cheers, buddy.
Hi, buddy. There he goes, Bill B in DC on Twitter. And I loved it. I love that conversation. Love talking to him. Folks always love when I do talk to him. Bill, thank you very much for sharing your experience as a longtime DC resident and all-around thoughtful guy. It means a lot to this community. And it means a lot to me, as do our other two guests that join me today. Let's now get to Georgia State law professor, and coming up, hilarious and brilliant comedian J.L. Cauvin and I. You gotta stay for that one. If not just for our dueling Mitch McConnell impressions, which is very funny. But first, Georgia State constitutional law professor, author of Supreme Myths and Originalism as Faith, and host of the podcast Supreme Myths. I caught up with Eric Segall on Sunday night. Follow him on Twitter, where he's constantly tweeting at @eSpinSegall. Okay, so here he is now, the great Eric Segall joining me now. Lots to discuss and get your reaction to the events of the past week. How did you see them? Thank you for joining me. How did you watch them? Were you just glued to your TV on Wednesday and the days since?
Yes, with deep sorrow of the kind I didn't think I could possibly feel less than a week after my state sent 2 Democratic senators to Congress for the first time in I don't know how long. Wednesday, Pete, was just, it'll be a day that our grandchildren will study. And it was terrible and sad. And that's not very profound.
Terrible and sad, but predictable in many ways. And
yes.
And could have obviously been a lot worse. And I wonder if the positive spin, as we talk on Sunday night, The PGA is abandoning Donald Trump. Big companies, big banks are abandoning the senators and others in Congress who questioned the outcome of the election. Do you think that the violence that occurred, the terrorist attack, however you want to call it, the insurrection, I don't know if you have settled on a phrase or verbiage yet, do you think that it does so much damage to Donald Trump, his family, the name, and Republicans who have been telling the big lie about the election outcome? I feel like it's, in kind of a way, a good thing that it happened.
That's a great question. You're good at that. And I'll answer it in a minute, but then let me mention something that you and I talked about off before we started that I want to mention. So I'm going to answer your question. My answer to your question has no more merit or wisdom than any person who is reflective and thinking about it. But I want to make this point because the impeachment proceedings are likely to start next few days. Mm-hmm. I personally hope they go on for a long time. We'll get to that in a minute too. But this is really not a time when law professors, including me, obviously, should be given a special voice. We are in a period now of political events where turmoil, where the Constitution really doesn't help very much. But even if it did, Pete, this is not a time for what James Madison called parchment barriers. And what he meant by that was the Constitution is really only as good as the people who believe in it. And if the people don't believe in it, then parchment barriers will not work. And I am not a sophisticated enough intelligence person or military person who knows really what's going on behind the scenes or even has a good guess about it. So whatever should happen next is not a law professor type thing. I just want to make that clear for people.
I greatly appreciate whenever you do that, distancing yourself or being honest about where your expertise lies. And we're going to get to impeachment and the Constitution and all of that and talk about what you are an expert on and get your take on that. But I'm asking everybody this same question over the next 2 weeks.
It's a great question. Yeah, it's a great question. I'll answer it. I have no freaking idea. If in fact this was the worst that's going to happen,
right,
and if this was kind of an aberration in a way, and we're not going to have, riots and massive, violence after the 20th, then what you're saying is really smart and makes sense. I don't know how Trump comes back from this among anyone but the most vile. I don't even think Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley can defend Trump after this. I really don't. So in that sense, maybe. But Pete, if Wednesday was just the match to light the fire, then no. Then it could mean, a lot of terrible things for the United States of America. So let me talk about that for 1 second. I know somebody who is, and you understand why I can't say his name, a retired 3-star general. I have a personal relationship with, and I'm helping him write an op-ed where he's going to say retired generals shouldn't talk about politics except when your country's on the line. And our country is on the line, and Trump needs to be taken out of office today, tomorrow. The Pence should act today. It's a remarkable thing coming from a retired 3-star wereign I hope he writes it. I mean, we've written it. I hope he publishes it. He may not, and I understand if he doesn't want to. But his point is valid. This could be the end of something. It won't be the end, but it could be, it could be the beginning of the end of something, or it could be, the end of
I think the next 10 days matter and the inauguration matters. And then if nothing horrific happens, then you do see a change, a pause. We take a step back from DEFCON 5.
Right. Agreed.
Because once people see Joe Biden in the White House and flying around in Air Force One and Donald Trump not, and also not hearing him on social media with calls to action every hour, I think
I'm not sure on the last point. Sorry. I agree with everything you said into that last point.
Well, I think that it diffuses any potential future large action like we saw Wednesday or what we're hearing people talk about for the inauguration, that they can somehow have the power to stop Joe Biden from becoming president and keeping Donald Trump there. But I also just want to I just think that all of these arrests that you're now seeing are also important, really important, as a signal to any idiot that would consider doing something stupid.
I hope so. And maybe, and I hope so, and I hope so.
Yeah.
But I've read enough. I'm not an expert on this, so I'm not going to, but I've read enough to suggest that the right-wing white supremacy movement is more organized than maybe we have given it credit for in the past.
Well, let's just talk about just really quickly your theory that Trump and many others have been kicked off social media, and the apps that they want to turn to have now also been kicked off their hosts, and they're not accessible on the phones. Google, Apple, Amazon are taking Parler down. So
thank God.
What is
the video I just watched on Parler is well, it talks about the rebirth of a nation. Pete,
yeah, that video is
code.
What? Yeah,
no,
it's
no,
all.
No, don't do that.
We don't need
don't
code.
Do that. Don't. Well, I don't know. I don't know if
what do you mean?
Not.
There's a full-blown white supremacy, white nationalist movement.
Okay.
There has been for a long time.
Yes.
A welcome to what everybody of color has known for a long time and what other experts have been watching. Well, this is not like that video you sent me did not shock me at all. You reacted to because it was rebirth of a nation. At this point, only 40,000 people have seen it. It's slickly produced and edited, but whatever.
Right.
I mean,
right. So on the Twitter, Facebook, Parler, or whatever thing, it's really an interesting question. First of all, let's just make this clear. This is now one law professor comment that I say as an expert. There is no First Amendment problem with that. I mean, Trump is sued, but Twitter's a private company. You know, they can show or not show whatever they want. And in fact, if the government made them show things, that would violate the First Amendment. So that I'm an expert on. And I will go to my grave on that.
Are there any constitutional lawyers or smart legal minds saying otherwise that you've heard?
Not that I've seen on this issue. Now, I will say, back in the 1940s, there was a Supreme Court case where I don't know if you know what a company town is. You might be too young. But back in the 40s, 30s and 40s, 20s, 30s and 40s, there were companies that owned towns. They provided police protection. They provided fire protection, but it was private. And the Supreme Court held the public streets of a privately owned town, even though it's really just private property, were like public sidewalks and First Amendment applied. The court reversed that case 20 years later, as it should have. So there is a case out there that some people could use, although it's been reversed, for the idea that, maybe some free speech restrictions apply to private entities that are so powerful and so, like public entities, but Twitter and Facebook, I don't think are that yet. So, now the Supreme Court has bought worse arguments than that. But they're not going to buy this one.
Okay, so that's the first question I had. You've already answered it, and we don't need to spend a lot of time talking about it because it's a pretty clear-cut issue whether or not Twitter.
No, what I was going to say though was not that was my law professor take. My citizen take is I really don't know which is better. I don't know if they should have kicked him off. Now, maybe in light of the inauguration, they should have. But Pete, you know me, I'm a European free speech guy. I believe in free speech, but not like America does. I'm the least free speech friendly law professor, I think, maybe in the United States, but except for maybe a guy named at NYU named Jeremy Waldron. But leaving that aside, I believe in free speech. I just don't believe in it. Like I would allow the government to ban political ads on television 30 days before an election or 60 days before an election, like England does. I would allow that. No law professor in America.
I feel like some states actually.
No, they can't.
Even at the state level, they can't. Okay.
No, they can't and they don't. Supreme Court reversed it in one day, summary reversal. So I would allow that. So that's my pedigree. But I do believe as a philosophical matter that driving speech underground can be much more dangerous than exposing it to sunlight. I wonder if that is with all due respect, an outdated view, given the fact that you could, maybe from anywhere you want, type anything you want and incite tremendous violence. Right. So let's talk about that because I wrote a whole article about that. And now I'm back in my expert mode. Okay. The Supreme Court, which is probably what I should stick to. The Supreme Court has held, as everybody agrees, that a true threat is not protected by the First Amendment. I have no right to come up to you and say, I am going to blow your head off in 30 minutes with this gun pointed at your head. That's pure speech. It's not protected. And everybody agrees on that. The problem is the Supreme Court has not defined what a true threat is. And the current law, Pete, comes from a case called Brandenburg versus Ohio. And in that case, a Ku Klux Klan rally happened and some very vague general threats were made. They were arrested. The Supreme Court said that was unconstitutional. And they said for a threat to be not protected, you have to prove that the maker of the threat had the intention to carry out the threat and that it was imminently likely the threat would be carried out. And imminent is a key word in that sentence. I wrote a whole law review article saying the internet has made that case obsolete. And that if I'm at an anti-abortion rally and I yell, pointing to a clinic, someday that clinic should go, that's probably protected speech. Like I would protect that speech. But if I put on the internet, the clinic at 54 Cherokee Lane should go, that's not protected speech. And so I think the internet does change the current, should change the current law on imminence, which does go to your point that in a world where someone in a basement can reach 1 million crazy people in a minute, then our free speech, our views about free speech need to change. And your point, right, our views about the relative merits of burying speech or not may need to change.
The less important concern, but almost as concerning, is tweeting out that a thing happened that didn't, or a thing didn't happen that did, which is what the president has been doing. When, you know, this question, this infuriating question that is being asked, or the defense of it is, well, listen, 70 million Americans are concerned that the election was fraudulent, and we're just asking questions for those people. And of course, the answer to that is that's because they've been told that by their president. And that's a danger. Now everybody's referring to this as the big lie, right? And that's not as dangerous as screaming fire in a crowded theater on Twitter, or launch the nukes attack on Twitter. But it's also very dangerous, and I think that's why Twitter was shutting down those lies, and Facebook as well. It
is. But see, my distinction, the distinctions I make are between imminent threats and non-imminent threats. I think that distinction with the internet doesn't matter anymore. Targeting does matter, though, Pete. In other words, I think all Jews should go back to Israel is a fully protected statement. I think Joe Katz should be sent back to Israel is a different statement, right? We agree on that. I am nervous about any free speech regime other than defamation that makes truth and falsity the key point. Because I understand with Trump, it's very easy to see his lies.
Yeah.
He could have done it very differently.
Well, it's not very easy to see his lies, apparently.
Well, it is to any intelligent person, but most intelligent people. Pete, do you think, this is a non sequitur.
Good.
Don't yell at, we've known each other now for over a decade. You're one of my closest friends. I want to promise that you won't ridicule me for this question.
I cannot give it to you. I'm so sorry.
Rats. All right, I'll say it anyway. Are you sure 70 million people voted for Trump?
Why would I not be?
It's too painful. It's too painful for me to think about.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, until someone gives me, I'm generally a person who wants evidence for an argument or a view. So
how painful is it, though?
It's the most painful outcome of the election, I think.
Yes, I agree. I can't.
That after his, that anybody would vote for him to begin with after to grab him by the pussy or so many other things is his behavior his entire life.
Yes.
And so that was really hard for people in 2016. And it was almost as hard to see so many people vote for him after 4 years of horror.
I think I've mentioned to you before, probably even on air, but I have a very close friend who lived in Brussels for most of the last 30 years. And in the 2000s, when Bush was elected the first time, Europeans, liberal and conservative, according to my friend, were like, well, it was a close election and they seem not that different. And maybe in other words, it was fine. It was American politics. They could not understand how we could elect him again after he lied us into Iraq.
Yep.
They couldn't understand it. Like, how can you do it twice?
It's always interesting to hear the international perspective on American politics. Of course, let's get to impeachment. And can I try to lay it out, or do you want to just jump? Do you not need a question?
You're the host, my friend.
Well, I think it's important that we discuss what's being discussed by specifically Democrats and what Republicans that are on the record so far have said. But right now, it looks like they are drawing up articles of impeachment, and that they are going to House, which is controlled by Democrats, are going to impeach the president this week. The question, of course, is what will the Senate do? And so my understanding is the House has to send the articles of impeachment when they're done to the Senate. And I think this is the important thing that I learned, and maybe it's wrong. Nancy Pelosi can send those articles anytime she wants. And the Senate then would have to start its trial once they get them. The question that's being asked right now on the Sunday shows is, and the strategy for McConnell seems to be, listen, well, if you send it to us, we're not going to be able to start it till the 19th. And if we started on the 19th, then the first 2 weeks of the Biden presidency will be occupied by this trial. And if you want the Senate to be holding an impeachment trial and not confirmation hearings, and that's your choice, but I don't think it's very good for American people to move on. So they could send it anytime they want, and the Senate can confirm his cabinet and then take up articles of impeachment in the summer, in the spring.
So what I've been saying since really
and why do they even need to impeach him if the only reason to impeach really would be to make sure he could never run again, right?
No.
Well, they can't impeach. They can't get him out of office.
Let me explain.
Okay. By the 20th.
So first of all, he needs to be impeached for historical purposes. But that's not my area. I'm just saying I think what he's done needs to be forever stained. So that's my opinion as a citizen.
But now, answer the rest of this with what the Senate will do when it.
Let me explain. What I've been saying from the beginning is the House should start drafting articles of impeachment tomorrow morning or whatever, drafting them. They should not rush to get them to the Senate before January 20th, because they should send not one, not two, but a whole bunch of the Georgia phone call was clearly an impeachable offense. The one to the Secretary of State, where he basically said, change the votes. That's what he basically said. Find the votes and change the votes aren't different things. Mm-hmm. So that's an impeachable offense. What he did with the U.S. attorney down here in Georgia might be an impeachable offense. I need more facts, but it might be an impeachable offense. He basically forced the U.S. attorney out because he would not investigate fraudulent.
Yeah, that story went very undercovered, and the U.S. attorney in Atlanta.
But I don't have enough yet on that. I need to know more about that. And clearly we need to have incitement to insurrection or incitement to anything is a very tricky concept. Take their time, do it right. There's no time frame here. Send it to the Senate. I wouldn't say a year, but in a month or so, but do it right. That's really important. Now, there are some con law professors are in fact divided over whether someone can be impeached who's no longer in office. But I don't care about that. And you don't care about that. I'm going to tell you why. No court is ever going to touch that. So I don't care what academics think about it. I only care what courts think about it. The Supreme Court has said, now, admittedly, this was a case involving a judge, not a president, but the Supreme Court has said it will not second guess impeachment hearings in any way, because the only way to get rid of a federal judge is through impeachment. And even if that's what it said in that case. Now, what I'm saying is even if a case doesn't involve a judge, the rulings on impeachment affect the only way the American people can get rid of a federal judge short of death. So the court's not going to touch it. The fact, and it's not, I'm very solid in that prediction. So it's a purely political question. So yes, he can be impeached after office. That's what should happen for two reasons.
After the 20th.
After the 20th.
You think he should be impeached by the House?
Yes, and then by the Senate. Yes.
Well, the Senate won't do it. The Senate won't impeach him. They will not vote to impeach him. Most likely.
Let's wait to see what the other reason to wait, by the way, is to see what the district attorney in New York does. I believe Trump's going to be charged with economic crimes. So I have no more knowledge about that than you do, but that's my instinct. So,
but those are separate consequences.
No,
then.
It's not, because no. Committing a felony while in office, if that's what happened, is another impeachable offense. So I'm not saying this should drag out for years, and God knows the country doesn't want it that way. But the worst scenario is he's impeached by a Democratic House and then not convicted by a Republican by a Democratic Senate.
But that's the most likely scenario.
Pete, I don't think so.
Why not?
Because I'd like to think, I mean, gosh, the Washington Post reporting, has been so great about the awful terribleness of what happened inside the Capitol the other day. I don't know if you saw the article or the film, but it's so scary. I think we are going to learn a lot more in the upcoming months. And it needs to be, for the reasons you say, it needs to be airtight. The case for impeachment needs to be airtight. With Republicans, that's a very hard thing, right? I mean, but I think my intuition is the rats are going to leave the sinking ship pretty fast.
But you're saying that the United States, the Republicans in the Senate, are going to vote, enough of them at least, to get to the 2/3 required.
Yes.
You think that that's a possibility?
I absolutely do.
All right. Well, I mean, therein lies your calculus as to why he should be impeached and why the House should take its time with their investigation.
Yes. Now, there's a strong counter argument. One that actually, so I've changed my mind on this issue.
Remember the first impeachment, by the way, Republicans did not want to hear from any witnesses. I have a feeling they're going to want witnesses this time.
No, that's the point. No, that's the point. The House needs to have all that covered in terms of documentation and affidavits long before it gets to the Senate. That's my point. So I read every syllable of Trump's speech at the Capitol.
Oh, yeah? 70 minutes.
Yeah, I read the transcript. I didn't watch it. I couldn't. That's cruel and unusual punishment. But I read it. I read every syllable. And I put some of it on Twitter today. I put the worst of it on Twitter today. That speech alone is not enough for incitement. And I'm a person who would accept incitement long before most constitutional law professors. But when you add that speech, if it's true that the National Guard was told not, whatever that truth is, I don't know what it is, but if in fact Trump did other things even one other thing to make sure that the violence happened or not stop it, if there were orders given, if the National Guard couldn't be caught, whatever it is, now we have an incitement. And we need that, because the speech, I swear to God, Pete, if they try to prove incitement by that speech alone, I'm going to be so mad, because that speech is not incitement. It just is not. Take that incitement and a bunch of tweets, maybe. If he was involved in the video you just watched,
reasonable people can disagree with you on this regarding the speech? On incitement?
Not on the four corners of that speech. Did I say speech?
I like speech. I think it should be
not
a
on
word.
the four corners of that speech. Reasonable people can disagree, I think, on that speech plus all of his tweets. But then Pete, we don't want to send it up to the Senate where reasonable people can disagree. We don't. We want to send it up to the Senate as strong as possible. By the way, and if we send it up that last time was a farce. If we send it up as strong as possible and the Republicans still say no, okay, I can live with that. They'll be the ones looking foolish. So nothing that's worth doing, and very few things that are worth doing can be done quickly. And especially something like this. Now, I think the opposite argument is, yes, we need to get past this. We need to get past Trump as soon as possible. And maybe that's right. I think reasonable people can disagree about that. But that's not my instinct. My intuition is once he's out of just like yours, when he's out of the Oval Office, when Biden is in office, when we have a new Senate, all that stuff happens. I don't think there's an urgent need to do this as quickly as possible.
I just want to wrap up just to get your reaction by telling you a couple of just kind of news items and getting your take on it. But this today, I mentioned this earlier, but the PGA, which
I love this.
You're a golfer.
I'm a shitty golfer. But I try.
The PGA is canceling all tournaments and instituting a lifetime ban ever holding any event at Donald Trump's courses, including stripping Trump of hosting. He was apparently scheduled. One of his golf courses was apparently going to be hosting the 2022 PGA Championship. Wow. That's massive because that's, number one, his bottom line. He makes money. Obviously, number two, his ego. Moving on, Citibank, JP Morgan, and Marriott and more are cutting ties and campaign money to anybody who voted to question Biden's electoral victory. This is Bloomberg now reporting. Citi, JP Morgan, Marriott, and pausing political donations. And now I'm just seeing this one. Donald Trump's website credit card processor just dropped him. Anybody that is a big company that is in any way associated with anything with the last name Trump, because of what happened on Wednesday, is now seeing it as toxic to be connected to him. Or awesome. Anybody in Congress, apparently, who has been promoting the big lie that he didn't win.
So that's interesting. So wow. So first of all, I'm in favor of all of that, obviously.
Okay.
But here's why, Pete. So let's take George Bush. He's a good example. The second, George Bush. I worked for George Bush the first. Let's talk about George Bush the second. Clearly a president who did horrific things, from torture, right? From torture to lying ourselves into the Iraq war, from attacking a country that we never should have attacked to begin with, and so on and so forth. He's terrible in a way that has always been different than Donald Trump. And that's what I've been trying to say on your various shows and podcasts for 4.5 years or 5 years. And I can't prove this, and it sounds maybe even arrogant to say it. Donald Trump is not Nixon. He's not George Bush. Andrew Johnson we can talk about, but it's a different time. Donald Trump is bad to the bone. There's nothing redeeming about him. He can't even fake empathy. He is Stalin. He is Hitler without the tools. You yelled at me once when you did. You may not remember this, but you yelled at me when I said he was Stalin without the tools. He is Stalin.
I'm completely agreeing with you now.
Right.
But there's maybe seeing the damage that he's done. I mean, the movement that he is in charge of is the most damaging movement that has ever.
But I'm not even talking about his success. I'm telling you, as a person, he is bad to the bone. He is. America can breed its own Hitlers and Stalins, and we did.
Yeah.
His father was a fascist?
Yes.
Okay. Now, so he's a one out in that sense. What you just said, I have friends who would say everything you just said, they should do to George Bush. I do. I have friends who believe that because they think, first of all, hundreds of thousands of innocent people die.
Corporate sponsors dropping. Yeah. But
I wouldn't be in favor of that.
Well, there's George Bush. It's different. George Bush is not doing anything. He's not making any money. He's not doing anything but trying to volunteer his time and paint.
I mean, the day he left office.
Yeah. Again, I think it's different.
It's different. We agree.
George Bush went away on purpose. He knew nobody wanted to talk to him.
Right. No, we agree.
He had no money needed to make money. He just went and started painting.
I'm just, when you said lifetime, so this
lifetime
why
ban.
This hit me, Pete? Lifetime ban is harsh. Like, lifetime ban is not something that should be done even to bad people. Like, because I believe in rehabilitation. I do. In fact, I think George Bush has done quite well rehabilitating himself.
Have you ever been lifetime banned from anything?
Supreme Court Admiration Society.
I'm not allowed to go to New York sports clubs. Moving on.
So I just want to make the point clear.
I'm kidding,
that
folks.
America needs to see Trump not as a terrible president, but a one-out sociopath. And in that sense, yes, I'm very happy with everything.
Right.
I despise George Bush. He did terrible things.
Yeah, same.
I would not be in favor of a lifetime ban of anything. With Trump, I am.
All right. Anything else?
I hope we survive to talk about this next Sunday and the Sunday after that.
Yeah.
I'm very nervous about January 20th.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. Let's end this with me asking you a question.
Okay.
And I have an election law expert on my podcast tomorrow. I'm going to ask her this, but she doesn't know more about this than you or I do. This question: the military. Are you in favor of an incredibly strong military presence in Washington D.C. for the inauguration? Yeah. Do you want generals and tanks and And if that's what it takes.
No, I don't think there's any need for armor.
Okay.
No, I think I think the National
Guard and the police can handle it.
Yes, I do. Because of the way that, yes, for sure.
Okay.
I don't think anybody's. I mean, if they have, I don't think they're organized enough, passionate enough, or equipped well enough to fly a plane or drive a bus. Or I think that the whole place is going to be so cordoned off. I would not have any problem with them just going to the what's that little house, anywhere and doing the inauguration, on TV. I think
I would like it to be virtual and in private.
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be in private. I think we could all watch it, but I think
I mean that. I mean, I would be in favor of just the Chief Justice and and members of Congress.
We don't need all the pomp and circumstance. The bottom line is,
public.
It'd be nice. It'd be nice to have it.
Not in COVID times, anyway.
That's a good point too. But I mean, 12:01 on the 20th, Biden's got to get right to work. So let's just go. Let's go.
Agreed.
Let's do it safely and let's go. COVID safe and safe from potential terrorist attack. But I honestly don't think the reason why there wasn't worse, horrible blood spilled than there was. 2 cops and 4 of the seemingly protesters, including a guy who may or may not have tased himself in the nuts and died. But the reason why there wasn't more, because these are not organized people. I've been obsessed with watching these videos, and the most important conclusion I have watching all these videos of these people is that they all wanted to be in charge. They were yelling at each other. The strategy. Yeah. They came from different strands and backgrounds, and from Q to militia to just Fox News house husband.
Are you not concerned at all about foreign involvement?
I mean, not on the ground. No. Pipe bombs, planes, buses, trucks, not really.
Okay. I agree with you about your characterization of most of these people. What we don't know, let's just say I agree with you. One caveat is if Trump has an ability to connect with terrorists, would he use that? Yes. So that's my only concern.
No, he doesn't have the ability to. I think that he is currently most likely shut down by Pompeo and Pence and others.
I hope so. Not by Pompeo.
Yeah, no, Pompeo. Yes, by Pompeo. I think they're ignoring. So? Yes, I think they're ignoring him. I don't think it's. I think
that's what you do with a toddler.
Yeah,
when they throw
they're just. Apparently, he's supposed to fly somewhere to the border to celebrate his success.
City of the Alamo, not the actual Alamo, but the city.
I'll be surprised if that plane takes off.
Actually, Pete, I want it to take off, and I want Pence to then do the 25th Amendment.
Well, why does the pilot of Air Force One fly that plane? He should say no. Nope, not going to fly the plane.
Unless we want him out of D.C.
What would that do?
Get him out of the fucking White House, Pete.
Well, he'll be out of the White House once he's on the plane. Gets on the plane.
That's what I'm saying. I want him on
we're not going anywhere, sir. You're done.
I want him to be barred from returning.
I want him to find out he's no longer president while he's on Air Force One. I've just decided that.
Me too. That's what I'm saying. Get him on the plane and get Pence to the 25th Amendment. And when he lands, he's done.
I hope. I do know that several Air Force One pilots listen to this podcast.
I just want to say that sentence I uttered, relying on Mike Pence to do anything right, which he has done last week, is maybe the biggest surprise of all of the last.
Yep. As soon as he didn't fulfill Q's prophecy and Trump's order, that changed everything.
Yep. I agree, my friend.
But let's not give him any credit. There's nothing he could do, right? Constitutionally, nothing. He couldn't have done anything, even if he wanted to do it.
Correct, but he could have tried.
Fine, but he knew. Why would you try to do something you can't do? A parliamentary procedure you can't do.
Hopefully he hasn't. Right, and that's probably
Cruz and Hawley were allowed to do what they did, and so they did it. Pence didn't have any option.
Mentioning those two names as we're about to end is not fair.
I'm sorry, you're right.
Because you know how I feel about Ted Cruz and Hawley.
I hope what happens to Trump in terms of all these companies leaving him. I mean, that's what's happening to them as well. Their funders, their big company, corporate funders are going to run from them.
Cruz needs to be primaried from not his right, but from a center-right Republican.
Well, you know who's running against him from the right? The Q shaman, the guy with the horns. got a good shot.
It made me laugh. Thank you, Pete, for that.
Thank you, buddy. I'll talk to you soon.
I appreciate it. Yep.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. No, I wasn't sure he was going to get that joke. Q Shaman. Who else could I have said? Who would have been funnier to say is going to primary Ted Cruz from the right? An oil well? An oil well is going to. A bullet? All right, so finally now we've got to get to one of my other favorite people to talk to. Always love talking to him. I think I've talked to him the last 2 Sundays in a row. Been talking to him more and more because I just think he's such a thoughtful, smart, and hilarious guy. He is a great comedian who has put out, several albums now. He's got 2 podcasts, and you should hire him on Cameo. We talk about his new project that he's going to do, Trump from Jail. Everybody's favorite Trump impersonator because he is the best Trump impersonator because he's just such a great writer and creative guy. Here it is, JL Cauvin, at JL Cauvin. Go listen to his podcast, subscribe to him, support him on Cameo. Can't say enough good things about this guy. Here it is. JL, I just want to start by telling you something. I feel the need. I don't know if I took it from you or not. I feel like I'd been working a little bit on a Mitch McConnell impression. You came on here and did yours. You did it very, very well. But he's taking his glasses out. I got to record the Zoom.
Oh.
I would like to do dueling McConnells. Are you prepared?
Well, of course I'm prepared. You can.
All right. What should the subject be? How about grocery shopping?
Well, when I go to the grocery store, I ask, were these animals treated in a very unhumane way? Like how were these chickens caged up? I don't want free-range animals.
Right. I prefer to eat chicken is
that Forrest? Is that an elderly Forrest Gump I'm talking to?
This is Senate Majority Leader Mitch. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell here. Now I like to go to the grocery store and I like to eat chicken that is caged, but I also like to talk to a real human being at the cash register.
Well, that's great. And life is like a box of chocolates.
Lots of things I want to talk with you about. I think my McConnell, it comes and goes. President Trump, first of all, thank you so much on the record for joining me. People are loving having you here. And if people aren't listening to JL2 podcast, following him on social media, hiring him on Cameo. So just thank you, first of all, on the record. Thank you.
And I've got I actually have a brick wall and a prison shirt, and I am honestly going to start marketing prison Trump cameos once he's out of office, to try and give it a little sort of.
Can you give me an example of what you'd be that actually sounds hilarious.
Yeah.
What do you mean prison Trump cameos? Like, what is the premise here?
Basically, I may be doing a web series called Trump 2023, which is just Trump doing a series of videos from prison. I actually have an autographed headshot from Bob Gunton that was a gift for my uncle. He played the warden in Shawshank Redemption.
That's right.
So that
you told me that story. Desk. That's so great.
Yeah. And it'll be it'll be just different lessons from prison, weight training, learning new faiths, what groups he's becoming a leader of. I've already decided there'll be one teardrop tattoo. And the reason, of course, is because, with the amount of people I killed with COVID, I'd have teardrops all over the place. There's not enough space on my very strong body for enough teardrops to represent all the people I killed.
Wow.
And I like the idea of him becoming almost like either a gang leader, an unofficial president of the prison, not with the cliche, when Trump's in prison, he's going to get fucked in the ass.
No, none of that.
No. He'll probably not be able to go to a prison. Do you know what I mean? He'll be like house arrest is like what really the best you can hope for because of the sensitive nature of the prisoner. I don't think you can actually put him in a physical prison, but no, I would, it'd be things like that. But for cameos, it would simply be, sort of, you'd have me in the hat. I just ordered a custom made "Make Prison Great Again" hat, and
okay,
it's orange, and it'll go with the orange jumpsuit.
Oh, great!
Yeah, so I think for anybody who just wants, I know that these aren't going to last forever, but I think it would be fun for another year to extend the sort of.
No, I think it's great.
Cameos.
And by the way, I think that our generation of stand-up comedians is so focused on and wanting to be great stand-up comedians in the most traditional way. But even our generation of stand-up comedians think Robin Williams and Eddie Murphy went on to acting and at times dramatic roles. What you're doing is you're using your brilliance and your comedy to do what you do better than almost anybody else. And that's just a brilliant and respectable way to do comedy because you're so good at it. And I think you never stop doing it. I think you never stop doing it because you're the way that you position Donald Trump with your impression is, I think it's very important. I think it's really important that you say what we know he's thinking. And I think it also says a lot about how much of an awful person you are.
Yeah, well, no, you've got to, you don't, what is it? You don't stare at you stare long enough into the void or something. The void stares back or whatever that phrase is. No, but with Trump, I think it's, and I got into this on Twitter today, not in a mean way, but I don't think people realize, like, I don't look at what happened with Trump in the Capitol and the inciting as like, oh, this is a time I need to be serious. I've been serious the whole time. That's the thing. I've never looked at Trump as like, isn't he wacky? No, it was a mean-spirited, cutting brand of comedy that I wanted to do. I wasn't looking to do the Tonight Show's version of Donald Trump.
No, here's the thing. We know that's why that's true. Your razor sharp, fearless political commentary on Twitter, especially mixed in with all the comedy, is what's made, I think, it brought you a lot of integrity as a comedian, because we know exactly what you're thinking. You tweeted today something that was not a joke. It was razor sharp, perfectly executed political analysis, and it was this. Charlottesville was when it should have been game over for Trump. This was a sequel, not a surprise. Let's get into it here and stop talking about how talented you are and get to you showing, not telling. What is your reaction to what happened on Wednesday at the Capitol, and where does the blame lay in your mind?
It is the logical, though tragic conclusion or beginning of final phase of Trump's rise to power, his abuse of power, his control, and our reliance on social media, and frankly, a strong minority in this country of stupid, gullible, and cruel people. I've always said that QAnon can't convince. I would argue QAnon can't convince a good person of the shit they talk about.
You back that up.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. QAnon can't convince
I don't have the psych degree. I look at that and say, there's certain things that, yes, it might, there's such a sympathy out there of like, these people were lied to. They were lied to.
Yeah, I have that. I have some of that sympathy. I have some of that compassion.
I don't.
Go ahead.
Like, I think it just makes the liars
disabuse
worse.
me of my compassion.
No, and let me put it this way. I am one of those people who says, as we've talked about, I'm a man of some faith. I'm a church-going person who doesn't want to wish in my outside of emotional moments. I don't want to wish ill on anybody, really. I hope for people to change.
No, I ask you, I think you're a moral compass. You're a Catholic man. You're a very generous person. I've known you for a very long time. If you say that my compassion is misplaced, I respect your thoughts. Go ahead.
No, I shouldn't say this. There's times where I say, I believe the judicial system should take care of this, and I'll let God worry about their soul and their whatever becomes of them beyond this earth. But I looked at that and I thought, how many people, the people storming the Capitol, I'm not saying I don't think they are good people. And I'm not saying that as far as judging their eternal worth as beings, but I don't think they're good people in terms of our society. I think they are Trump. It's like hypnosis to me. You can be hypnotized, but you've got to be open to it. I think the QAnon, the Fox News, the OAN, something in you, often race, often racial animus, has to keep you open, I think, to this sort of rhetoric where you're not just down on your luck, but there's a core of you that wants to blame, that wants an enemy. Not just, this is too bad, or God, today sucked, or I'm just mad at my boss today. This is I need a global enemy, a racial enemy, and there's something in you that has been either cultivated or you're born with that makes you want to lash out at things that make no sense, that are so blatantly false, and you want to wrap yourself in. I have a joke, if I may. I have a joke that was on one of my albums, and I remember recording an even better version of it at the Tampa Improv in 2018. Or 2019, 2018, yeah. I don't know, 2012, where I said Tiger Woods foreshadowed Donald Trump. And I said, because when Tiger Woods won all his golf tournaments, everybody wanted to say, oh my God, golf is going to be different now. Here, they're going to see Tiger Woods and be inspired by this man of different races who doesn't look like your average golfer, who's so great. It's going to inspire. And I joke and I say, and then Black, Latin, and Asian people looked at golf and said, nope, still boring. But the thing that did happen was a bunch of white dudes came, jokingly, but seriously, talked to their sons and said, they're not getting golf too. And if you look at all the guys who've won golf tournaments, like since Tiger sort of took a dip, the whitest name, Dustin, Brooks, Kyle, like all these, like you might as well be a Todd. It's all these like white dudes who basically like emulated Tiger Woods with the weight training. And they obviously all grew up idolizing him. But it was like, I always joke, I'm like, but deep down in their white core, they were like, I'm going to get golf back for you, Dad. And then I look at Obama and I say, we did the same thing with Obama on an even bigger level. We said, oh my God, race, are we post-racial? Have we made real progress here? Never ignoring the fact, always ignoring the fact that it always takes a truly exceptional human being to break through, to be the first. It's never just some run-of-the-mill person who it's like, hey, look, we just picked an average black dude. Yep. Aren't we great? No, the truly exceptional, the truly flawless get to be the ones, the Jackie Robinsons. And I look at that and I say, we looked at that and said, oh, racism's done. And what happened was a large enough percentage of this country looked at Trump and said, I feel threatened simply by the existence of this black president with a funny name. No matter how centrist and composed he is, I see him by virtue of just his name and his skin as a radical, and I need a reset. I need a warm orange blanket of racism and old time rhetoric to comfort me again. So we didn't move forward. We whiplashed because of a vocal, terrified minority. But at the end of the day, that terror is not a terror I respect. It's not a terror that makes me sympathetic to go, I get it. You just are uncomfortable with black people, so let me hear you out. No,
but I understand what you're saying completely, and I want to make a point that might take.
They're open to it. They're open to hate. They're open to this insane rhetoric, and I don't think it's just because they lost their job. I don't think it's just you know what I mean? I don't think it's just because of this. Half of those fuckers out there I'm sure have jobs, that were out at the Capitol. So it's
half.
But you know what I mean?
No, they probably all do. They probably all do, but they probably all also have any number of quote grievances. I mean,
their main grievance is that America it comes from, and Trump is the perfect representative of this. I think it comes from people who think America is a zero-sum game. And when other people make progress, and this is the Trump mindset. When other people make progress, it means it's being taken from you, as opposed to, oh, look, my neighbor's doing well too, or that community's doing well as
but
also.
I agree with that. I think it's one of the most important points that can always be made, and I can illustrate that point by watching your success over the past year has been very difficult for me. I feel like it's been you've directly taken, it almost feels like you've gone into my bank account, because literally I lost my corporate gig and then your career took off. It feels to me like your success is as a result of my...
Yes, you're the Paris Hilton to my Kim Kardashian.
What does that mean for people who don't know?
She was Paris Hilton's little assistant when Paris Hilton had her reality show, and then all of a sudden
she overtook her and swallowed her whole.
Became a billionaire.
Right.
Brand.
Exactly. That's so. It is so. Sometimes it is true that one person's success is to the detriment of another's, and I think that the two people talking here in this conversation is a perfect illustration of that. Yes or no?
No, you're doing.
You came over here and tried to burn down my shed just weeks ago.
That's right.
What do you think about
for freedom?
You were yelling for freedom, for freedom. What do you think about the Twitter bans and the social media bans and the corporate companies abandoning Trump and the PGA announcing no more events for you at any of your courses? What do you think of all these? Well, specifically, just start with Twitter, because you get Twitter. You're a comedian. You have strong opinions on speech.
Here's the thing. Anybody who, without being able to cite the exact Supreme Court cases, I can obviously, cite the most basic First Amendment.
That's all right. I already had Segall on.
Perfect. It's the idea of Trump's speech is exactly the speech that has been carved out as exceptions to the First Amendment freedom. Inciting violence is the classic sort of example of that's not protected speech. And that's what he's doing. The thing about Trump that I've always said, and I could never say this on Twitter for fear of, saying something potentially criminal. Donald Trump has done about 100 things legitimately that would make him toxic, a felon, he has been so covered by being president that he still gets this extra, as people say, I respect the office. That's one of those things. Hey, when Obama, I didn't like Obama, but I respected the office. And I always say, first of all, you probably didn't. And secondly, so what? Obama respected the office as well. Donald Trump somehow manages to urinate over our traditions, our government, and the office he occupies. But then it's somehow we're supposed to give him the respect that he does not give to the office himself. Yeah. I feel like you disqualify yourself from that respect when you don't. Joe Biden is going to be a president that, whether you like him or not, is going to be worthy of respect. You can disagree with him, but I think he's going to be somebody who honors and respects the office and the power that he is given, and therefore is owed the respect of the office. He's not owed agreement. He's not owed
which is true, I think, of most adults around the world, period. It points to how terrible of a human being that Donald Trump is. Because what you're saying about Joe Biden is true of most people.
Yeah.
It's most people in my community. All right, maybe not in my community.
But I would say when I look at I've basically I've tweeted this before, that Donald Trump is like the stripper pole for broken white men.
I'm sorry?
That Donald Trump is the stripper pole for broken white men.
What does that even mean?
It means that if you're a father, the cliche used to be keep your daughter off the pole.
Right.
I feel like the new cliche should be, if you're raising your son right or your daughter right as a father, then they should not be looking for an awful surrogate father in Donald Trump to make their problems go away, because you have failed so hard in your responsibility that imagine if in your core you thought the balm you needed to make your life feel better was a racist, stupid, loud rapist. And you said, man, I just feel like he gives the love our country deserves. I feel like we finally have a patriot I can be proud of. It's like somebody in your family has failed you then, if that's how you feel.
It is a really funny joke and a great point. And it also points to your hypocrisy again, JL, because you literally sent for my daughter's 13th birthday a poll to our house with a note that said, "For your daughter, XO JL." Not funny. My wife did not think that was funny.
Well, from what I hear, she doesn't think much is funny. Okay, so.
Not of this guy.
I would no, but to me, if I'm about Twitter specifically, they've set a bad precedent because, and I understand they were in a tough bind. I do think that. And by the way, I don't know if anybody, I think somebody may have made this joke before, if they haven't, if you look at pictures of Jack and Mark Zuckerberg, Jack looks like the mad scientist who created the artificial person that is Mark Zuckerberg. With his like long beard and his black turtleneck, and then Zuckerberg comes in with his like android haircut.
This may be anti-Semitic, but did Zuckerberg and Jared Kushner get created by the same 3D printer?
They might have.
Because those guys strike me as very similar in a lot of ways in terms of their interests.
I think Jared is like the 2.0, you know?
Awful.
Like they're still very bland. But,
JL.
No, but I think getting banned from Twitter, I get why it looks bad in a way. Because I think that we've never had a full reckoning of the power and the substance of these social media companies in our lives. Like they're more like ABC and NBC and CBS than we sort of admit.
Great point. For our generation, they are the Dan Rather and Tom Brokaw, Walter Cronkite, and Peter Jennings. Yes.
And it's one of those,
which is crazy,
not be right or wrong, but it's not good, but it is a fact.
Yeah.
And I think they were in a tough bind because once again, he's the president. So they gave him way more latitude than a regular person. And they were in a tough situation where they're going, well, do we kick the president off? I think Mark Zuckerberg didn't want to because he's only focused on the bottom line. I think Jack Dorsey has shown, while not perfect judgment, a lot more wrestling with real ideas of what's right and wrong.
Well, I think it's great platform. I just think honestly, it's great that you couch your criticism with a little nuance, and this is not an easy decision, and nobody would necessarily want to be in the position to be deciding this. And then the last question, or criticism of it that I think is valid is, which is why there shouldn't just be like a couple white guys in charge of these decisions. These companies should probably be broken up, and they should have boards with people that represent different kind of.
To be fair, Twitter, and the reason I stayed on Twitter and quit Facebook a few years ago is I just felt like Twitter was a little more egalitarian, a little less money driven, and a little less. And I mean, I think Facebook has clearly violated, antitrust laws in terms of how they conduct themselves.
I don't know if it's clear, but you're the Georgetown educated lawyer.
No, it's just not even from I didn't take any antitrust classes, but I read a great book by Ron Chernow on John Rockefeller. And can you get Ron Chernow on the show?
Probably. I bet you I could.
I would love that. That's just hey, for 2021. I don't think he has a book coming out anytime soon, but I loved Grant. And Hamilton, by the way. He did Hamilton.
I didn't read that, but I'm reading Grant off and on.
Love Grant. I love all his biographies.
He's a very well-respected guy, so I'm sure he's sitting by a fireplace mahogany bookcase. I'll get him on. Probably got a camera.
But his Rockefeller biography, just reading about, I've always said this about Bezos, about Zuckerberg, and others of that ilk, is that if these guys wore monocles and top hats, we'd go, you're the bad guy, we got to break up your company. But if you wear a T-shirt to work, people go, hey, he's cool. He's doing like cool stuff.
It's different.
No, it is different, but the truth is these things have gotten, the writing has been on the wall for, close to a decade with these companies, if not longer, not Facebook necessarily, but they are humongous monopolies exercising vicious monopoly power. Like they are doing exactly what Rockefeller did, but he was doing it with trains and oil.
It's far worse than what those guys were. The power that social media companies have is they can snap. It's just it's the way a lie travels around the planet, literally within seconds. Literally is very, very dangerous.
Yeah. So I think, I don't know. I think that it was a good decision. I'm sort of laughing at the idea that Trump is his entire, he has only one choice. He has to move to a foreign country and start like a shadow government or buy an island and try to rule over like some people that way, which is fun. I'm predicting a Donald Trump Jr. presidential run in 2024.
For real or
For real. I hope that they go through with basically banning Trump from, I hope they do go through with an impeachment and ban him from running again, because that will, in a weird way, free the Republican Party. And I think secretly many of them would go, we may lose the next election because we won't have that fired up base. They will stay home unless it's to commit hate crimes. But but Donald Trump Jr. will see the vacuum and go, I can get 25% just like my dad did. And if the GOP runs another 10 guys in 2024, then he may end up getting the nomination.
There's no way, because what was that? Who was it? Reagan and Mondale in the moment of debate. I knew John F. Kennedy. Sir, you're no John F. Kennedy. Who was that?
That was Lloyd Benson.
That'll be the situation when it's, it's the Republican primaries and it's like Scott Baio and Don Jr. and Roy Blunt.
But he's
and they're going to say to Don Jr., I know your father, and you're not your father, you fucking idiot. He's not nearly as smart as his dad. He is dumb as stones. Donald Trump Jr. is so broken. I feel, when I see him, I see the most I used to see him when he was in high school, because I worked as a coach at the Trinity School where he went. And those guys, they're broken. Their father, just like his father, broke them. Horribly broken people.
I'm making that prediction. If he's not under indictment, he will run. And I think enough people will support him as an FU. They will go, I will support the prince of the MAGA kingdom.
Yep.
Even though I know that I'm not as enthusiastic.
This is your worst political analysis ever. And if you're right and I'm wrong, you decide right now what I owe you or what I have to do to embarrass myself.
I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't, you don't owe me anything. Being right all the time is the only reward I need.
J.L. Cauvin, everybody. Anything else?
I got a couple more minutes till this taco meat is done.
That's hilarious.
That sounded very sexual.
Well, let me just ask you what you think about all of those people. Have you seen the guy in the airport yet crying?
No.
Oh, guy in the airport crying. They kicked him off a plane and called him a terrorist, and he's crying. It's gotten quite a few views already. But what do you think of the people, and how obsessed have you been with this? Because I can't stop reading and watching videos and learning what happened the other day.
It scares me, to be honest, a little bit, just because what I think may happen if these people actually try to do some other psycho march on the Capitol or something. I think they are going to many of them are going to end up dead, because I think they will not make this mistake again. Like, to me, what I don't understand is
who won't make this mistake again, law enforcement or the people?
Law enforcement.
Yeah.
They've been embarrassed, rightfully so. But you draw a line and you basically say, you cross this fucking line, we consider that, an assault on the Capitol. And I think you might have some, they're not going to allow that to happen again. They've been embarrassed, and, law enforcement is scary enough. Embarrassed law enforcement? Yikes.
I feel bad for their families.
So I think when I don't know though. I think I don't know if I said this on your show or on someone else's show. I apologize, but it's the idea is maybe we're done. And I mean that in terms of, I think I made the comparison to England. England ruled the world for a while. Now they don't. They're still fine. They're still like a thriving nation that's a power in the world, but they're not England of the 18th century. They're like a good country contributing. And I look at us and I say, we're like a bully that punched itself in the face.
We're like a bully that tased its balls.
Yes. And that, to me, that's one of those ones where you read about that guy and it's funny, but you read what that guy wrote and you're like, you sound like a deranged and terrible person.
I didn't get to his diary yet.
Well, he was the guy holding guns. It's always the guns and come bring it or whatever. He's one of these guys. But you look at some of these people and you go, oh no, I think this guy is itching for some kind of.
Let me just ask you one more question.
Yes, sir.
Because you're a big guy, have you been in fistfights in your life?
I blame a child psychologist for why I haven't been. I was a very violent little kid, and they sent me to a psychiatrist or psychologist in fourth grade. And I don't think it's a coincidence that in fifth grade is when I stopped beating kids up and started doing impressions of people. Wow. I think impressions in comedy are the sublimation of my violence. So when somebody says words are violence, I tend to agree with them on a literal level. I think it's my substitute for violence.
Oh, then I'm just going to leave it there because I think that's more fascinating than anything else. Wow. We'll pick up there next time. Fourth grade. Wow. That's really, everybody's at each other's throats now. And I just I want to fight everybody, which I don't want to actually fight anybody. But I mean, if I'm you, I'm throwing my weight around is all I'm saying.
I throw a lot of inanimate objects when I'm angry. I don't fight people. I once got into in 2014 during the NBA Finals or 2013, I got into a bar fight at my favorite bar. Yeah. But it was more like the giant from Gulliver's Travels or something, or Gulliver. I guess that was Gulliver. Because these guys were insulting the bartender. And I sort of, did the sort of, hey, come on, just, bop, let's move it. And then the guy pushed me. Yep. And then I threw him to the ground. And then two of his friends and him lifted me up and then I just threw the dude into the bottom of the bar and held him there. And I literally. How tall are you this time? How big are you at this point? I'm the same size I am now, but more weight room and less fat. Yeah. 8'9". And I remember what was rushing through my head, obviously being a former prosecutor. I've never had an adrenaline rush like this, not because I wanted to fight. All I kept thinking was, what if I fight these guys and I hurt one, or I accidentally, and I'm not a fighter. I'm not like a skilled combatant, but I'm a big guy. So what if I throw a guy and he bangs his head into a table or something? Yeah. Yeah. And this is all running through my head. Sure. And I'm literally having visions of myself eating bologna sandwiches in a holding cell while the 45-second fight is going on. And then I'm on the ground and I just held the dude's head against the bottom of the bar, not to try and hurt, to basically be I'm not punching anybody, but I'm not going to get hurt. I don't want you to hurt me. And then a cop who was in the bar, apparently off duty, bought me a beer afterwards. And I was like, could have used more than a beer, sir. J.L. Cauvin. Who could have? Those guys at the Capitol could have used your brain in deciding before they committed a crime. That's right. Maybe you think that's a path I could take. Maybe I go dark on the web for a little bit, reset as the new, I come in as the biracial, charismatic, conservative heir to the Trump. No, I don't need you to go in dark in the web. Started with that. Thank you, buddy. I love you. The greatest, J.L. Cauvin. Yeah, another good one in the can with J.L. Cauvin. Why am I rhyming so much lately? That is it for today. I got to wrap this up. It is 1:20 a.m. on Monday, the 11th, and we haven't been vaporized yet, so that's a good thing. And I don't have COVID, and that's a good thing, too. And hopefully you don't as well, and you're staying safe. I really appreciate you listening to the podcast. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. Go to the paid subscription link in the show notes or patreon.com/BeatDominic. Hang out with us Thursdays at 8 on the Zoom and anytime on the Discord platform where you're never alone. I hope you're okay. Reach out if you're not. I'll talk to you tomorrow. I love you. Take it away, John Carroll. Making sense.